there! Thank you for joining me in this session on flipping your classroom. Chances are you're already flipping and you want a refresher. You're seriously thinking about flipping your classroom next year, or maybe you were just scrolling down the list of sessions and this piqued your interest. Whatever the case, you're interested and I am so happy to have you. Be sure to stick around until the end, where I'll give you a sneak peek into my freebie, my Flipped Classroom Starter Kit. And if you've grabbed the VIP ticket, you'll be receiving 3 complete flipped lessons from my unit on equations in one variable. We'll take a look at that as well. So let's go on and get into it. The name of this session is Flipping Your Classroom 101. And before we get into it, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I have a master's degree in secondary education with a concentration in mathematics. I have 3 years teaching experience at the secondary level. I've been writing curriculum since 2015, but I focused on the flipped classroom in 2019, where I started writing my own flipped curriculum, and I started working with classroom teachers. And I'm also married with children, and here are my 2 peanuts, Emily and McKenna. Their ages 3 and 5, and we're on a puddle walk in that picture. But anyway, so there's going to be 3 parts to this presentation. The first part is what is a flipped classroom? Part 2, 5 steps to creating a flipped classroom. And part 3, I'm going to be going over some strategies for implementing your flipped classroom. And since there's going to be quite a bit of information in this presentation, and I want you to be able to sit back and enjoy this session, you're on summer break, I went ahead and I added a link to the slideshow in that freebie that I'm offering. So make sure you click that freebie below to grab that. Part 1, what is a flipped classroom? So in a nutshell, if you're not familiar, a flipped classroom is a traditional classroom flipped. Traditional classroom, you're completing your lesson, your lecture in class, you're sending students home to complete practice problems. Well, it's the opposite in a flipped classroom. In a flipped classroom, you'll be sending them home with the lesson and then coming back to class to complete the problems that you would have traditionally done as homework. So let's take a look at a 45-minute block. In a traditional classroom, you might spend 5 to 10 minutes doing bell work, followed by 35 minutes of lecture, and then wrap it up if you're lucky with 5 minutes of an exit ticket of some sort. And then students would be sent home. They would complete 30 to 45 minutes of practice problems at home. In a flipped classroom, what I'm going to show you is that the beginning, it starts the same, so you'll still have 5 to 10 minutes of bell work. But in that last 40 minutes is going to be personalized practice with you, the teacher. And then at home, they might have 15 to 20 minutes where they're watching a video lesson and taking notes. So let's say this sounds great, right? How do you start? Well, I'm going to give you 5 steps to creating a flipped classroom. They include making a list of learning objectives, gathering or creating video lessons, creating a note-taking system, creating what I call a quick check assessment, and then determining the in-class activity. So let's take a look at the first step, making a list of learning objectives. This can either come from your current curriculum, maybe your textbook, or it's going to be a scope and sequence that you or maybe a math coach or administrator had come up with. A pro tip on here, be specific. So one of the objectives in the curriculum that I used was I can write numbers in scientific notation and perform operations with them. This can actually be split up into 3 smaller, more specific objectives. It can be split up into I can write numbers in scientific notation, I can add and subtract with numbers written in scientific notation, and I can multiply and divide with numbers written in scientific notation. And in the next section, I'm going to show you why it's so important to be so specific. So the next section is creating or gathering video lessons. You can either create them yourself or gather them from the web. If you decide to create them yourself, you have a few options. You can create a slide deck with narration. That's just a series of slides put together to form a presentation. That's what you're viewing right now. I'm doing this on Keynote because I have a Mac, but PowerPoint works just as well. You can write on a tablet. This is a recording of you completing problems on screen as you speak two popular apps for this are Janoski and Explain Everything. You can create a screencast. This is a recording of your computer screen with the option of showing yourself. And by the way, that's a great way to personalize your videos is by showing yourself up in the top corner. You've seen that before. A few apps for this are Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, Loom. I know at one point some of these were offering teacher discounts, so look into that. You can also create a talking head video. This is just a recording of yourself. So you might have a whiteboard in the background and you're just completing problems on screen. You can use Photo Booth app if you have a Mac, edit it in iMovie, but also all these apps that I mentioned under Screencast, you can just record yourself if you want. So just a few tips if you're going to create them yourself. First, keep them short. So a study showed that median engagement for videos less than 6 minutes long was close to 100%. That means most students watched the entire video when it was less than 6 minutes long. From 6 to 9 minutes, it was still over 90% engagement, and that's why I included up to 9 minutes in this presentation. But after that, from 9 to 12 minutes, the engagement dropped to around 50%. And that goes back to where I said to be specific with those objectives. That's really going to help you limit the length of these videos. You're also going to want to include 2 to 3 good examples. So you're going to have to limit yourself on this. But you can also include new examples in a student practice section. So at the end of my videos, I always have a problem where I ask the students to pause the video and try one on their own. Sometimes I'll include some new information in there because I know I'm going to be going over that problem in the video after they pause. So they're still going to be learning the information. Next, do a test run. Not for every video. All right, just when you're starting out making your videos, do a test run of a lesson. Make sure you're including enough white space. That's just the space around the problem. You don't want too many distractions. You want the students to focus their attention on the problem you're working on. To make it more engaging, you can include animations. A great resource for this is Pixabay on the web. They include royalty-free images and graphics. And also, don't be afraid to entertain. And what I mean by that is let your personality show through. All right, so if you're funny, include some humor in it. Make sure they know it's you on the other end. And also, don't talk too slow. Some of us want to reach every learner, but talking too slow will definitely discourage some students when the information's not coming at them quickly enough. And also, I know on YouTube and Vimeo, students can actually slow down audio and they can speed it up. All right, and the third tip, mistakes are okay. So if you're at minute 4 and you goof up, that's okay, keep going. Tell them you made a mistake, it happens in class, you're only human, just keep going. You don't want to redo these videos over and over again. And if you decide to gather them from the web, here are a few places you can look. Khan Academy, TeacherTube, TED-Ed, SlideShare, YouTube, and I've also got a bunch of 8th grade math videos on my website as well. All right, next, you're going to want to create a note-taking system. This could be guided notes or notes that have been previously completed with the strategic placement of blank spaces. Here's an example of one that I created for solving one-step equations. You'll see that there's a spot for the objective, and then I go through each slide. I pretty much almost copy and paste, but then I take out some words so that they can fill it in. I'll include all the examples with some blank space below so that they can complete the problems as they're viewing them on screen. If you don't have time to do this, that's fine. You can create some guidelines or an outline of expected notes. So here's an example, and maybe this is something that you'd want to type up so you can print out, copy for all the students. They can staple this in the front of their notebook so they know what you expect in their notebooks every time that they're going to be watching a video lesson. Maybe you want to include the date, the lesson title, the objective at each time. You can have them write down definitions, and maybe you want to be so specific to say, I want you to circle all the definitions, and that way they can go back and it'll stand out to them when they're looking back through their notes. Fourth, you're going to want to create what I call a quick check assessment. So this is sort of that bell work that I was talking about. It's 3 to 4 problems that students are expected to complete before the start of class. This is going to allow you to determine where the students are struggling the most, and then you can split them up for the in-class activity accordingly. Here's an example of the quick check that I created for that one-step equations lesson. You can see it's 4 problems, they're all multiple choice, and I sort of split up that objective into mini objectives so I can really hone in on where students are struggling. Pro tip for this, you can use an online tool for instant feedback. So you can create a Google form, you can use programs such as Edulastic or Edpuzzle. I know Edpuzzle, you can incorporate questions throughout your video. So you can pause halfway through and then insert a question there to just see if your students are paying attention, if they're gathering the information that they're listening to. You can just kind of hone in, see where they're at with that. And also this can be completed the night before, so you have the results before class even starts the next day. All right, and lastly, you want to determine the in-class activity. This could take the form of a partner challenge, a group activity, stations, which could include games, independent work, technology, etc. If you're excited, your students will be excited. And just a tip with this, differentiate. You can actually scaffold within one learning activity by creating stations that are suited for each group of students. So maybe you administered that quick check assessment and you have a group of 7 kids that are struggling the most. They missed 3 out of the 4 questions on that quick check. Maybe you want to create a group with them that's completely teacher-led. So you start out in that group at the beginning of class, and then you can split up your other students accordingly. And just some in-class activity ideas. You can do a partner challenge. You can have students both solve a different problem, but have them lead to the same answer. This one's fun for students, but it does require a little bit of prep work on your end. You can have a group of peer teaching. So in groups, students will take turns teaching a concept or problem to the group. You can use digital activities. So you can use apps or websites such as iExcel, LearnZillion, Math Playground. You can send students on a web quest. You can create yourself a Google Slides activity and use digital manipulatives. I've included a list of digital manipulatives in that freebie. Manipulatives such as counters that you can bring on screen, timers, any of those manipulatives that you usually use in class, they have them available for online activities as well. You can have application activities, so students will work in partners or groups to solve real-world problems. A gallery walk. This is probably one of my favorites. It's probably the easiest to turn a worksheet into a gallery walk. So you just cut up a worksheet with all these problems. You'll post them around the room. You use a timer to allow students, either alone or in pairs, to walk around solving each problem. And to wrap up this section, I'm going to leave you with this quote from Cynthia Brame. She's the Associate Director of the Vanderbilt University Center for Teaching. She's talking about flipped classrooms. She says, in terms of Bloom's revised taxonomy, this means that students are doing the lower level of cognitive work or getting the knowledge and comprehension outside of class and focusing on the higher forms of cognitive work, which is application, analysis, synthesis, and or evaluation in class, where they have the support of their peers and teacher. And how powerful is that? Isn't that so cool? Why wouldn't you want to flip your classroom? And part 3, implementation tools and tips. So first, you're going to want to find a learning hub. Probably familiar with this by now, but it's just a place where all assignments are posted, completed, graded, archived, etc. You can use Google Classroom, Seesaw, Canvas, Schoolology. This is just going to help you and your students stay organized. All right, let's talk about student buy-in for a second. This is going to be key. At the beginning of the year, your students are going to probably not know what a flipped classroom is or what it's looked like, so you really need them to buy into this concept. You can let them know that it frees up class time to help them learn. Let them know that homework is now at a minimum, and also your days are going to be filled with fun activities versus just a dull lecture. Almost equally as important is the parents' buy-in. All right, remember this is a new concept. Consider sending home a letter before the first day. Just explain what your class is going to look like, what a flipped classroom is, why you're flipping your classroom, and what they can do to help. And actually, I've included a sample parent letter. It's 100% editable, and it's in that freebie that I mentioned earlier. All right, a tip for the first week. Model the behavior that you want to see. So the first week, you're probably not going to send any videos home. You're going to watch the videos in class instead. Show them how to take notes, monitor them taking notes, show them when to pause so that they can complete a problem, or maybe they just need more time finishing up those notes. And you can also show them how to rewind, tell them that it's okay because they're in control of this now, so they can use those features as they need. And then just ongoing, I would stay consistent. You want to keep a routine in your class so that your students know what to expect. So with that video going home, with the bell work at the beginning, and then always that in-class activity, just keep it consistent. Also, focus on the students that need the help first. So we were sort of talking about that earlier when you were splitting up your groups. Make sure your attention is on those students. And then encourage the students to use the video lessons more than once. Maybe it's for a review, or maybe it's that day they're just having trouble on something, they don't quite remember something. Maybe have computers available if you're able, and let them go back to look. Okay, just another tip. You might want to insert a Q&A session at the beginning of class. So your typical day, your students come in, they answer that quick check, and then they're usually grouped in groups to complete that in-class activity. You might want to add a Q&A session real quick just to address any misconceptions and prepare students for the upcoming activity. And then looking ahead, what if you do complete a full year of flipped lessons? This quote is from Jonathan Bergman and Aaron Sams. They're the teachers that are known as the pioneers of the flipped classroom. They've written books about the flipped classroom, but in one article, they say as teachers start to flip their classrooms, they gradually build up a library of videos or screencasts of their lectures. It suddenly occurred to us that our students had an entire library of instructional videos at their disposal. They could now learn at their own pace. And these guys actually went on to conduct a mastery classroom, which is where each student learned at their own pace. So they just had a guideline of each unit, sort of like a checklist for the students. And one student could have been on lesson 5, while another one who was really getting these concepts moved on to lesson 10, and they're already taking the test for that first unit. So it's just looking into the future, something that might motivate you to complete all this year of lessons. But at the very least, you can use these, like I said, in review for your flipped classroom. These kids can really just have this whole library at their disposal of videos to use. Okay, and here are those resources that I was talking about if you'd like to look into any of the data or the ideas behind the flipped classroom yourselves. Okay, that concludes this presentation, but before you go, I want to show you what to expect in the freebie I've linked to below. First up in your flipped classroom starter kit is the lesson plan. You can print these out to plan your lessons, or these are editable spaces in a PDF, and you can fill them in right there. Next is that list of helpful tools I was talking to you about. So I was talking to you about creating your own videos. These are all linked. All the apps I spoke of in the presentation are right here for you. Then we have a parent letter that I said I was going to include. This is 100% editable, so you can add your name, you can add your contact information. This is for you to edit for your classroom. And then lastly, VIP ticket holders, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 3 flipped lessons from my unit on equations in one variable. You'll see each lesson includes a video lesson complete with guided notes, a quick check assessment, and a main activity for each of those 3 lessons. The lessons are solutions of equations, one-step equations and two-step equations. If you're teaching 7th grade, you might hit on these subjects as well, but at the very least, you're going to see how I have these set up, so hopefully I can inspire you. Thank you for watching and happy flipping!